North Texas Congressman Keith Self, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. So I wanted to ask you, you met with Ukraine's president yesterday. What did you discuss and how did that meeting come to be?
Well, I'm here with the delegation from the House Foreign Affairs Committee. So we met with President Zelenskyy as a committee, as a delegation, which included even a judiciary member. But what we discussed was his priorities going forward, because as you know, the Russian offensive is either started now or will start soon, according to the analysis.
And so your visit with him comes just after President Biden's unannounced trip there. What did you make of the president's trip and how long was your trip planned for?
Well, our trip had been planned since the delegation trip was planned for weeks. Really, they didn't interfere with each other. They did not conflict. We were held up for a little bit because obviously his large support entourage makes things slower. But no, we were right on time. We got in a little bit late into Kyiv, but our meeting with the president went as scheduled. And we got a great conversation with him about his priorities going forward and the immediate need that he sees with the Russian offensive.
And do you support him and his efforts? And what did you make of Zelenskyy, the man?
He certainly has a vision, and he's very articulate with his vision. What I make of the situation is, I think it's increasingly clear that the proxy war is actually between the West, led by the US, and China. We know that China supports Russia now. Of course, Russia and Ukraine are the belligerents on the battlefield, but you've recently seen several moves from China. We know that they are supporting with non-lethal aid now. There was talk of them starting to provide lethal aid, which the US administration addressed. And then recently we see that Xi is going to visit Russia. So this is a fast moving, unfolding situation, Jack, that we see. And I don't know how it's going to go going forward, but stay tuned because there are a lot of very high level political moves being made.
How concerned are you? It sounds like your level of concern has kicked up a notch.
I am, because we do not want this to go into NATO or between the US and China. That must not happen. We must not have nuclear weapons involved. If we can keep this confined to the current battlefield, I would be all in for that, because we cannot let this get to escalate further. I frankly don't think Putin is going to use nuclear weapons. I don't think that's in the cards. He'll bluff, he'll threaten, but I don't think he'll do that. But we have a serious situation here unfolding that we need to manage correctly.
And so in your mind, what is the best way to do that? Is that to continue to send military aid to Ukraine and other aid to Ukraine?
Well, this has been unfolding for several years. We did nothing when he invaded Georgia. We did nothing when he invaded Crimea. We had the disastrous debacle, the withdrawal from Afghanistan. So this has been unfolding. Frankly, this is happening because Putin feels emboldened. To allow him to take even part of a sovereign nation, as he has done before, would further embolden him. So I really do not agree with the statement that as long as it takes, because as long as it takes indicates that it's going to be a long war. And I don't think that that's to the benefit of the defense of Ukraine. So we're talking about what, as a Foreign Affairs Committee, we need to be doing to make this the shortest war we can.
And so how do you do that? By continuing to give them aid and weapons, et cetera?
Well, I'm not going to talk about the humanitarian aid. Frankly, the dollars that we are giving the Ukrainian government, I think that's up to the State Department. I will talk about the weapons, and I was amazed at the Munich Security Conference at the military emphasis across the NATO nations to continue to support Ukraine, because frankly, the eastern flank of NATO, from the Baltics through Poland, understand that Putin must be stopped because they're next. The political scene is a little bit concerning because I think there's a little bit of light between the politicos in the Western NATO nations compared to the Eastern NATO nations who are on the front lines. But I think generally speaking, militarily, the nations are aligned.
I just have a couple more questions. I know your time is brief and I appreciate it. I did want to ask you, there are some in the Republican Party who say, hey, wait a minute, and not just Republicans, but I've seen the Republicans say, some of them say, you know, there shouldn't be an endless check, a blank check for Ukraine. And I'm wondering, you know, they say, well, what about our border, the southern border here? And so I'm wondering, in your mind, is this a case where both should be done as opposed to one or the other?
Absolutely. We can do both. All it takes is the administration to enforce the laws of the nation on the southern border. We don't need to give him more laws or more authority, just enforce the laws on the southern border. It is one of my talking points that I've been saying for months. I want a quid pro quo on the southern border. I want enforcement on the southern border. I want to secure our border as we should be doing. Texas, as you know, is on the front lines of that. And absolutely, I have been discussing this for days, that a quid pro quo on the southern border is absolutely necessary. I've been to the border twice. I've seen both sides of it, and it's got to be done. Now, the blank check that you mentioned, I'm not for giving any blank check to anybody, but I am for giving the Ukraine what they need to defend their homeland, because that's what I'm asking the administration to do on the southern border. And that's what we, as the leader of the West, the leader of the Western alliance, must do in Ukraine, or we're going to have Putin on the loose.
And that could mean, in your mind, U.S. troops defending NATO countries if he's allowed to go through Ukraine.
I don't think it means Article 5, which is what you're discussing, NATO Article, excuse me, Article 5. In the NATO charter, that attack on one is attack on all of them, and we would defend NATO nations. I don't think Putin wants that. But there are other nations that are not NATO members that might be taken as he tries to expand the old Soviet empire.
And my last question is, if you can say, for security purposes, where are you today and who else are you meeting with on your trip?
I cannot tell you where I am. But I will tell you that I've just met with some Texas soldiers, and we had a great chat, but I cannot tell you exactly where I am.
And my last question to you is, I believe you are out of Ukraine, though, correct?
I am out of Ukraine. That is correct.
And so you had to take the train out as opposed to flying out, all right?
Took the train in, took the train out. It's a long train ride.
And what was it like for you, and how nerve-wracking is it?
It's not, but I'll tell you one funny story. There was a fire a couple of cars down. So I heard someone running, and I heard someone saying, fire in the hole. Well, to a soldier, fire in the hole means something's about to go boom. So I was waking up out of a sleep, hearing the running, hearing the fire in the hole, and I was fixing to get off that train real fast.
I'm sure, but thankfully they contained the fire and everybody was okay.
They did.
All right. Well, North Texas Congressman Keith Self of the 3rd Congressional District, thank you so much. You travel safely.
Thank you very much. Take care.